Hi guys, it's Kayla from Kayla Lovejoy Equine Art, and today I'm going to show you how to make a zombie horse. So of course I start out here with my Dremel, and in this I have like a little carving type of bit, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to find a spot and carve it out on the horse's rib cage. So the purpose of this is so that you can see the horse's ribs. So of course we're making a zombie horse, so the creepier the better. And here I'm just using my Dremel just to cut away into the plastic. This step actually took me much longer than I expected. I really had to carve deeply into the plastic, and it took a while. I kind of cut out some of the video, that way it wouldn't take so long. And here I'm still carving away, just trying to make that hole deep enough that I can show the ribs, and so that there's also some like empty space in between there. In the background you can see my reference. And so I've kind of drawn a little reference for this horse and written down the things that I want this horse to have. And the showing ribs is one of the things that I wanted on one side. Now you can do this on both sides, or you can even go more extreme and carve a hole all the way through the horse if you wanted. But I'm just going to clean up this extra plastic here and wipe that off just so it's a little easier to sculpt the epoxy on once I go in with the epoxy. Now that I have this area the way that I want it, I am going to flip my model horse around, and I'm going to start gouging out the other side here. So I'm going to gouge out a little area, and my goal is for this to look like it's torn flesh. So first we have to make the hole where the flesh has been torn away, and that's what I'm doing right now with the Dremel, is just carving out another large area again. So I just keep using the Dremel until I've got what I want, and don't worry about little scratches or whatever. It'll be fine. It'll all look good in the end. It's going to be a zombie horse, so it doesn't really have to look too perfect. And here I'm going to cut away some of the leg, so we're actually going to see a little bone here later on. So I just remove what I want, and this is going to get all painted so it's all fleshy and looking. Now I just pull away some of the excess plastic, again just to make it easier to sculpt the epoxy on. And I just kind of look over my work and decide what other changes I need to make. Here I'm going to go for the eye, and I'm going to gouge out this eye. So he has a large eye socket, and that's going to look kind of cool. Now the eye socket is going to be much larger than the actual eye, so I go kind of wide and deep on this part. And once that's done, again, I kind of wipe it off, clean it up a little. Alright, so now I've got a new carving bit. It's like a little engraving bit that I put in my Dremel, and this one's small, so I'm going to make little scratch marks in the plastic. That way it looks like that flesh on the horse's hind end got torn off. It'd be kind of creepy looking. So I just make 4 little lines. I just drag this bit gently along the surface. It's hard to keep your hand steady. Try steady so you don't get zigzag lines. And then I sand it up a bit just to make it smooth. Now my plan for this model is to have little pieces of the tail sticking out, so it's going to have like the tailbone will be there. Now I'm cutting away the original tail on the model, and this sometimes can be a challenge. It's much easier if you actually put the model horse in a vise and then cut the tail off, but for video purposes I'm trying to hold the model steady while I cut its tail off. Now I'm going to drill a little hole in the horse's behind, and this is where a little wire is going to go, and the wire is going to create an armature for the clay. It's going to help it all keep everything together and keep everything from breaking. So I've created my hole with the drill, and now I've got my sanding drum. I'm just going to sand this a little bit so it's smooth. And once that's sanded, I'll be able to put a wire there. Here I have my wire, and I've got my super glue, and then just put a little drop of the super glue on there, and then I insert the wire. Now, the wire is way too long, so it's going to get cut, but first I'm going to sprinkle some baking soda onto the super glue, The baking soda on the super glue kind of creates an instant bond, and it makes that hold really strong. So here you can see I'm able to like move and bend the tail without that wire coming out or moving. And I just grab my little wire pliers here and cut it about the length that I'm going to want this to be. And then I'm able to use my pliers to just bend it a little more and get the correct shape that I need. So in this case, it's going to angle down a little. Now, next, I'm going to start working on building up some of my clay. So I've created this little thin clay noodle, and this is going to be one of the ribs. Now, I carefully placed this little clay noodle over my gouged out hole on the side of the horse, and this is one of my ribs. So I'm going to place 4 ribs total. I've got 2 of them here, as you can see, and I just break away a little chunk of clay, roll it out into a thin noodle, and then I place it on the side of the horse. Now, I kind of press it into the side of the plastic, and that kind of pinches the ends away to the length that I need. So here you can see I just kind of press down and pinch it into place almost, and pull the extra clay away. Now I go in with my not carbide scraper, with my color shaper. So I have a clay shaper here that I'm using to just kind of smooth things out and sort of work the ribs around where I need them to be. Now I have another little piece of clay. This is going to be the torn away flesh. So I carefully pinch this into a really flat, round piece, and then I press it onto the edge of the torn flesh, or gouged out area that I created with the Dremel. And then I use my clay shaper again to kind of press it into place and make sure it's pressed firmly on the model. Now, here I have another little clay noodle, and I'm going to place that here to be the bone protruding from the horse's leg. So I just press it onto the body, and sometimes this can be difficult. It doesn't always want to stick and stay where it's supposed to. Having a little water on your finger helps. So if your fingers are damp, the clay's not going to want to stick to your fingers as much. And then I carefully press it into place. And of course I press the other end on and pinch off just enough. Now we've got this little bone protruding from the leg here. So I think the final step here is going to be creating the tail. And creating the tail is actually a little bit difficult. I recommend using a reference or looking up online what horse vertebrae look like. So this isn't very accurate. It's just kind of my own artistic thing that I'm doing here, because horsetails, I believe, have a lot more vertebrae than I think the 5 that I'm going to add to this. So here I'm just using my clay scraper or clay shaper just to press the clay on. So you can see I kind of just put a little ball of clay on, and then I press down on the sides, the top, and I just keep pressing on each side to create that funny little shape that I've got. Now for the tip of the tail, I'm just going to place this little rectangular kind of piece on there. And here I'm kind of debating if it's too big or not, so it is. And I just pinch away a little bit of clay from this, and I add it back to the end of the tail. So for the end of the tail, I kind of have this little pointed piece. I thought that looked kind of cool. Again, this isn't the most accurate tail vertebrae. It's just kind of my own artistic rendition of it. So once I've got everything good, I inspect my piece again, make sure everything's correct the way I want it. I've got 4 ribs showing, I've got torn flesh, and a gouged out eye. I think it looks pretty cool. And here's the final horse.